At my acting class, my teacher said, "Can you cry like your mother died?" Why would I do that? Because it's a fresh memory that you can tap into. But my mother isn't dead. Ms. Brennan's face went white. She actually dropped her clipboard, her papers scattering across the floor. "Oh dear heavens, did no one tell you?" "Tell me what?" My voice came out small. The other students had gone completely silent. Even Tyler, who never stopped talking, was frozen mid-joke. "I think you still have time before her or your brother passes." She grabbed a pink permission slip from her desk, scribbling frantically. "Here's a permission slip so you can go to the main office. Immediately." "My brother?" "Go, sweetie. Quickly. Every second counts." I jumped off the stage, nearly tripping over my own feet, grabbed the slip from her trembling hand. Her eyes were wet with tears as she squeezed my shoulder. I ran through the hallways and burst into the main office. Mrs. Sazama, the secretary, looked up with red, swollen eyes. Mascara streaked down her cheeks. She'd been crying hard. "Oh, Melissa." Her voice cracked. She stood up, then sat back down, like she didn't know what to do with her body. "You were supposed to finish the school day first. The grief counselor said it would be better." "What happened to my mom and brother?" The words came out as a scream. She covered her mouth with both hands. "There was an accident on Highway 9. A semi-truck ran the red light at Madison. Your mother's car. They were both. I need to leave. Now." I slammed my hands on the counter. "Give me my keys." "Honey, I can't release you. My family is dying." I was crying now, ugly sobbing, snot running down my face. "Please, please." Principal Snap emerged from his office. "Miss Kennel, I understand you're upset, but according to Memorial Hospital, they only have about 10 minutes or so. You're 15 miles away. You wouldn't make it in time anyway. Better to stay here where you're safe, where we can support you." 10 minutes? And you were going to let me sit through algebra while they died? "We thought it best. The counselor said routine would help with the shock." "Screw this." I bolted for the door, slamming into the push bar with my full weight. I made it 3 steps into the parking lot before 2 security guards tackled me to the asphalt. My knees scraped bloody through my jeans, skin tearing on the rough pavement. Officer Boots, who usually joked with us at lunch, pinned my arms behind my back. Officer Godo, who'd helped me jumpstart my car last month, held my legs. "Let me go. My family is dying. They're dying and you're holding me down." "Can't let you drive in this state," Boots said, his voice strained. "You'll crash and kill someone else, even yourself." I was screaming, crying, fighting against them with everything I had when my phone buzzed in my back pocket. The vibration against the asphalt was distinct. A text. My hands were shaking so hard Boots had to help me pull it out, had to steady my thumb on the fingerprint reader. "Mom, did you like your little acting exercise? I had to pay everyone at your school extra for it. If you want to make it to Hollywood, this is what it takes. Method acting, baby." I read it 3 times, 4 times. The words wouldn't compute. Boots's grip loosened. Goto let go completely, scrambling backward. Another text. "Your drama teacher says you gave an incredible performance." She filmed it. "We'll use it for your audition reels. The Juilliard scouts are going to die when they see this." Another. "Raymond helped plan it. He's been taking acting classes too. We're going to be a whole family of stars." My vision went red. Actually red. Like when you press on your eyes too hard, but I wasn't touching them. This was all an exercise? My mother had paid my principal, my teachers, security guards, to convince me my family was dying. For an audition tape. I called her. She answered on the first ring, laughing. "Sweetheart, you were amazing." The tears, the desperation. Ms. Brennan said she's never seen such raw emotion from a student. "This is going to get you into Juilliard for sure. The way you fought those guards? Oscar-worthy." "Mom." Still that too calm voice. "I knew you had it in you. You just needed the right motivation. Every great actor has suffered." I took a deep breath. "Mom, I'm going to make sure you suffer. And I promise it won't be cinematic." "What's that mean?" Her voice was concerned all of a sudden. "You'll see. Expect a call from Ms. Brennan in about 30. I hung up, wiped my eyes, and started walking back to the school, with only one thing on my mind. I pull out my phone while walking across the parking lot and open the voice recorder app, hitting record and sliding it back into my hoodie pocket where the microphone will pick up everything. My knees hurt with every step. A sharp sting that reminds me of Officer Boots pinning me down while I screamed about my dying family. The asphalt is still warm under my sneakers, and I can see a small blood smear where my knee hit the ground. Students are leaving for the day, walking past me to their cars, and some of them stare, but nobody says anything. I keep my eyes forward and focus on breathing steady, in through my nose and out through my mouth like we learned in drama class for stage nerves. The main entrance doors are propped open, and I walk through them without looking at anyone, heading straight for the drama wing. The hallway smells like floor cleaner, and that weird cafeteria smell that never quite goes away. My hands are shaking, but not from crying anymore. It's something colder now, something that makes my jaw tight and my thoughts sharp. I stop outside the drama room door and press my back against the wall, taking 3 long breaths while I check that my phone is still recording. The red timer is counting up in seconds. I open my texts and start a new recording on a different app as backup, setting today's date and time in the file name so there's no question about when this happened. Through the small window in the door, I can see Ms. Brennan on her hands and knees picking up papers from when she dropped her clipboard. She keeps stopping to wipe her eyes with the back of her hand. Part of me feels bad for her, but a bigger part remembers her crying face when she told me my family was dying, how good she was at pretending, how she must have practiced. I push the door open and she jumps so hard she drops the papers again. Her face goes white when she sees me standing there. She stammers something about thinking I went to the office and her voice cracks on the last word. I keep my voice level and ask her directly how much my mother paid her to do this. She opens her mouth but nothing comes out at first. Then she admits it was $300. The words come out quiet and I have to ask her to repeat it louder for the recording. She says $300 again and starts talking fast about supporting my artistic development and how method acting requires real emotion, and this was supposed to help me access authentic feelings for auditions. Her hands are shaking while she talks and she keeps glancing at the door like she wants to run. I notice movement in the hallway and turn to see Tyler and 2 other students from class watching us through the window with huge eyes. They're whispering to each other and pointing. When they see me looking, they scatter like roaches when you turn on a light, practically running down the hall. The whole building must know what happened by now. Everyone saw me get tackled by security guards while sobbing about my dead family. Everyone knows it was fake. Their fear when I caught them watching tells me something important, though. It tells me they know what happened to me wasn't normal or okay, no matter how my mother tries to spin it. I turn back to Ms. Brennan and tell her I need to use the office phone to call my mother back. My voice sounds calm and cooperative, and I watch her face relax a little bit, grateful I'm not screaming at her anymore. She nods quickly and gestures toward her desk phone. I walk over slowly, keeping my phone recording in my hoodie pocket, and every word she says, every nervous laugh, every attempt to justify what she did is being captured on 2 separate apps. She hovers near me while I pretend to look up a number and I can hear her breathing fast and shallow. As soon as she turns to pick up more papers, I slip out of the room into the empty hallway. I open my texts and start forwarding every single message from my mother to my personal email, then to my school email account. Then I create a new cloud storage account right there in the hallway and send them there too. I screenshot each message with the timestamps visible, making sure to capture the phone number and contact name. If my mother tries to delete anything from her end or claim I made these up, I'll have copies in 3 different places with all the data showing when they were sent. My hands are steadier now that I have a plan. I save each screenshot to the cloud and to my phone's encrypted folder. The dark spots on my jeans are getting bigger where my knees are bleeding through the denim. I head toward the nurse's office at the other end of the building, walking past empty classrooms and a janitor mopping the floor. The nurse is a middle-aged woman named Mrs. Hanley, who always has butterscotch candies on her desk. She looks up when I walk in, and her eyes go straight to my torn jeans and the blood showing through. She asks what happened, and I tell her I was physically restrained by school security in the parking lot. I watch her face change from concerned to shocked as she helps me onto the exam table. She cuts away the torn denim around my knees with medical scissors, and I see the scrapes are worse than I thought. Gravel embedded in the skin and raw patches where the asphalt tore through. She cleans each wound carefully with antiseptic that stings so bad my eyes water. While she works, she asks questions about how this happened, and I tell her the whole story in a flat voice, about the fake emergency and trying to leave campus and the guards tackling me. She stops cleaning and just stares at me for a second before pulling out her phone and taking photos of every scrape and bruise. She documents each injury in her computer system with detailed notes about cause and location. I can see her typing that I reported being physically restrained by school security personnel. Mrs. Suzama appears in the doorway while the nurse is applying bandages to my knees. The secretary's mascara is still streaked down her face and she looks exhausted and guilty. She keeps apologizing over and over, her voice breaking, and she mentions that the grief counselor suggested waiting until after school to tell me because it would be less disruptive to my day. I ask for the grief counselor's name and contact information. Mrs. Suzama writes it down on a pink post-it note with shaking hands, and I fold it carefully and put it in my pocket. Another piece of evidence showing how many people were involved in planning this. The nurse finishes with my knees and I thank her, then head straight for the main office. I walk into Principal Snap's office without knocking. He looks up from his computer and his jaw tightens when he sees me. I tell him I need him to write an official incident report about what happened today. He leans back in his big leather chair and says he needs to review the situation with the district before filing any paperwork. His eyes won't meet mine, and I can tell he's already thinking about how to cover his own involvement in this. I pull out my phone and hold it up where he can see it clearly. I tell him I'm prepared to contact outside authorities if the school won't document what happened. He shifts in his seat and starts talking about proper procedures and how these things take time. I give him until tomorrow morning to file the report. His jaw tightens, but he doesn't argue. Just nods slowly and says he'll see what he can do. My phone starts buzzing in my pocket, and I pull it out to see Mom's name on the screen. I glance at Principal Snap and tap the speaker button before answering, setting the phone on his desk between us. Her voice fills the office, bright and excited. She starts talking about how the footage is going to change my life, asking if I've calmed down enough to appreciate the opportunity she created for me. I don't say anything. Just let her keep talking. She goes on about how this is what it takes to make it in Hollywood, how every great actor has a story like this, how the Juilliard scouts are going to be amazed when they see my raw emotion. Principal Snap shifts in his chair, and his face changes from defensive to something else as he listens. His eyes get wider and he looks down at his desk. Mom asks if I'm still there and I make a small sound so she keeps going. She mentions the payment again, says it was worth every penny to see me finally tap into real feeling. Principal Snap's jaw drops slightly, and he stares at the phone like it might bite him. When she finally stops talking, I tell her I have to go and hang up. The The silence in the office feels heavy and thick. I turn to Principal Snap and ask him directly if he has a copy of the video Ms. Brennan filmed. He opens his mouth, then closes it, looking trapped. After a long pause, he admits that Ms. Brennan sent it to the school's shared drive for educational purposes. I keep my voice steady and tell him I want a copy for my own records, that I need it for my audition materials. His whole body relaxes a little, probably relieved I'm not threatening to sue him right this second. He nods quickly and says he'll have Miss Brennan send me the file right away. He picks up his desk phone and makes a quick call, speaking in a low voice to someone on the other end. I watch his hands shake slightly as he hangs up. He tells me I should get the file within a few minutes and I thank him, standing up to leave his office. I walk down the empty hallway toward the main entrance, my phone clutched in my hand. 20 minutes pass while I sit on a bench near the front doors, and then my phone buzzes with an airdrop notification from Ms. Brennan's school iPad. The file name shows up on my screen, and it makes my stomach turn. I tap accept and watch the progress bar fill up. The video file is 3 minutes and 47 seconds of my complete breakdown, labeled with my full name and the words method acting exercise. As soon as the transfer finishes, I open my cloud storage app and start uploading the file to 3 different services. Google Drive first, then Dropbox, then iCloud. I watch each upload complete, the progress bars turning green one by one. The file exists in 4 places now, not just one. If anyone tries to delete it or claim I made it up, I have copies with timestamps and metadata that prove when and where it came from. I open the video file properties on my phone and start taking screenshots of everything. The creation date shows today's date and the exact time Ms. Brennan filmed it. The device information lists her school iPad. The file size, the resolution, her name as the creator. Every piece of data that proves this video is real and shows exactly who made it. I save each screenshot to all 3 cloud accounts, building a trail of evidence that can't be easily erased or explained away. My hands are steadier now that I have a plan and proof. The final bell rings and students start pouring out of classrooms into the hallways. I stand up from the bench and walk toward the exit, keeping my eyes forward. Other students stare at me as they pass, some whispering to each other. I ignore all of them and push through the front doors into the parking lot. Officer Boots is standing near the security booth and he tries to catch my eye as I walk past. Maybe he wants to apologize or explain himself. I keep walking without looking at him. I need to get out of here before anyone tries to stop me again, or convince me that what happened was somehow acceptable or normal. My car is parked in the back row and I unlock it with shaking hands, sliding into the driver's seat and locking the doors immediately. I sit there for a minute just breathing, watching other students get into their cars and drive away. Then I start the engine and leave the parking lot heading home. That evening, I sit at my desk in my bedroom with my laptop open. I create a new document and title it Timeline, then start writing down every single event from this morning. I note what time Ms. Brennan made the announcement in drama class, when I ran to the main office, when Mrs. Sazama told me about the fake accident. I write down when security tackled me in the parking lot and exactly what they said. I record when the text from Mom arrived and what each one said. Every detail I can remember gets added to the document with approximate times. When I finish the timeline, I save it to my cloud storage and make a backup copy on a USB drive. Then I open a new browser tab and search for juvenile civil rights attorneys in my area. Several law firms come up in the results and I click through their websites, reading about their experience with student rights cases. I find 3 that look promising and draft an email explaining my situation. I keep it brief but specific, mentioning potential emotional abuse and false imprisonment by school officials. I attach the timeline document and send the email to all 3 firms, then close my laptop and stare at the ceiling for a while. I pick up my phone and search for the CPS hotline number on the state website. My finger hovers over the call button for a full minute before I finally tap it. The phone rings twice before someone answers. A woman's voice asks how she can help and I take a deep breath. My voice shakes as I explain that my mother deliberately traumatized me as part of forcing me into an acting career I'm not even sure I want anymore. The intake worker asks careful questions about whether I feel safe at home, whether there's been any physical abuse. I tell her about the emotional manipulation and the way my mother paid people to make me believe my family was dying. I explain about the video and the texts and the whole planned scenario. She listens quietly and I can hear her typing on a keyboard. She tells me she's opening a case file and a caseworker will contact me within 48 hours. She asks for my contact information and address, then thanks me for calling and reminds me the hotline is available anytime if I need to talk again. After we hang up, I feel exhausted and wired at the same time. Like I just ran a marathon, but my brain won't stop racing. My mother comes home around 8 p.m. and I hear the front door open downstairs. She calls my name in a cheerful voice and I don't answer. Her footsteps come up the stairs and she knocks on my bedroom door, then walks in without waiting for a response. She's carrying takeout bags from my favorite restaurant and sets them on my desk. She asks if I've started editing the video footage yet, like this is just a normal day and nothing bad happened. I look at her and tell her quietly that what she did was wrong, that she hurt me badly. I say I need her to stop pushing me toward Juilliard and let me make my own choices. She laughs and waves her hand like I'm being silly. She says I'm being overly sensitive and that every great actor has origin stories like this, that I'll thank her someday when I'm famous. She mentions other actors who went through difficult training and how it made them better performers. I feel something harden inside my chest, like ice forming around my heart. I tell her I'm not hungry and ask her to leave my room. She looks confused and hurt, but takes the takeout bags and goes back downstairs. I lock my door behind her and sit back down at my desk. Before bed, I check my email and find a new message from Principal Snap sent to all parents about today's events. The subject line says, Emergency Preparedness Update, and I open it with my jaw clenched. He writes about an emergency preparedness simulation exercise that exceeded intended parameters. The email praises the drama department's commitment to realistic scenario training while apologizing for any unintended distress caused to students and families. He makes it sound like a legitimate educational activity that just went slightly wrong, not a paid scheme to traumatize me for an audition video. I read the email 3 times, taking screenshots of every paragraph. I save the screenshots to my cloud storage and add notes about how he's already trying to reframe what happened. The anger burns hot in my chest again, but I force myself to stay calm and methodical. Evidence first, reaction later. The next morning, I wake up early and check my email before getting ready for school. One of the attorneys has responded, a woman named Janice Murray who specializes in student rights cases. She wants to meet this afternoon and advises me to bring all documentation but to avoid posting anything on social media until we've talked. She includes her office address and asks me to confirm the appointment time. I feel a surge of hope reading her message, knowing that someone with actual authority is taking this seriously and wants to help. I reply confirming the meeting and spend the rest of the morning in my classes trying to pay attention to lectures, but mostly thinking about what I'll say to the attorney. I organize all my evidence files on my phone during lunch, making sure everything is easy to access and clearly labeled. By the time the final bell rings, I feel prepared and determined, ready to tell someone who can actually do something about what happened to me. The next day during lunch, I sit alone at a corner table picking at my sandwich when my phone buzzes with an unknown number. I almost ignore it, but something makes me answer. A man's voice comes through, tired but kind, introducing himself as Dustin Yu from Child Protective Services. He asks if I'm Melissa Kennel and if this is a good time to talk. I tell him yes, glancing around to make sure no one is listening. He explains he received my report and wants to schedule a home visit for tomorrow evening. He asks if I can have a parent present, and I say my mother will be there, though I'm not sure how cooperative she'll be. He says that's fine. He's used to difficult conversations, and his calm tone makes me feel like maybe someone actually understands how serious this is. After we hang up, I write down the appointment time in my phone's calendar and finish lunch feeling like the wheels are finally turning. Drama class that afternoon feels weird because Ms. Brennan keeps looking at me with this guilty expression. When the bell rings, she asks me to stay behind. The other students file out and she pulls a paper from her desk drawer. It's a media release form, she says, standard procedure for any video used in college applications. I take it and start reading. The form gives the school and my mother permanent rights to use the footage however they want, in any format, forever. I fold the paper carefully and tell her I need to think about it. Her face falls, but she nods. I walk out and head straight home, photographing every page of the form under good lighting before adding the photos to my evidence folder in the cloud. During 8th period, the intercom crackles and the secretary's voice asks me to report to the principal's office. My stomach drops, but I grab my bag and walk down the empty hallway. Principal Snap is sitting behind his desk when I enter. He tells me to close the door and sit down. He says I'm being suspended for 3 days for leaving campus without permission and assaulting security personnel during an emergency situation. My hands start shaking with rage, but I keep my voice level. I ask if he's seriously claiming I assaulted the 2 adult men who tackled me to the ground. He says the suspension will be noted in my record, unless I agree to accept it was a mutual misunderstanding. I stand up without responding and walk out, pulling out my phone before I'm even through the office door. I text Attorney Murray about this new development, and she responds within minutes asking me to forward all suspension paperwork immediately. The consultation happens that afternoon in her office downtown. Janice Murray is maybe 40 with short dark hair and sharp eyes that miss nothing. She listens to everything while taking notes on a legal pad. I show her my phone with all the texts, the video file, the timeline I created, the medical photos from the nurse. She reviews each piece of evidence carefully, asking questions about exact times and who said what. Finally, she looks up and tells me I have strong grounds for claims of intentional infliction of emotional distress, false imprisonment, and potential child abuse. She advises me not to sign anything the school gives me and warns that fighting this will be exhausting and public. I tell her I don't care how hard it gets. I'm not letting my mother or the school pretend this was acceptable. She nods and says we'll start with formal preservation letters to prevent evidence destruction. That evening, I'm doing homework when my phone buzzes with an Instagram message from someone named Marlon, who I vaguely recognize from the AV club. He says he heard about what happened and wants to help preserve the video file and extract all the technical metadata the school might try to alter later. He explains he's been learning digital forensics and knows how to create certified copies with hash values that prove the files haven't been tampered with. I message back asking when we can meet. He suggests a coffee shop near school tomorrow after his club meeting. I agree and spend the rest of the evening feeling grateful that at least one person my age understands how serious this is. The next morning, I'm walking to my car in the parking lot when Officer Boots appears beside me. He asks if we can talk privately. I'm wary, but I follow him to the security office inside the building. He closes the door and tells me he feels terrible about restraining me. He says he was following Principal Snap's direct orders, but realizes now it was wrong. He offers to write a statement about what happened and what orders he received. I accept and watch him pull out notebook paper and start writing by hand. He fills 2 full pages with specific details about who said what and when, including the exact words Principal Snap used when ordering them to prevent me from leaving campus. He signs and dates it at the bottom, then hands it to me. I fold it carefully and put it in my bag, thanking him quietly before leaving for first period. After school, I drive to the police station downtown. The building smells like coffee and cleaning products. I approach the front desk and tell the officer I need to file a report for unlawful restraint by school security personnel. He looks uncomfortable and mentions that school safety policies give security broad authority to prevent students from leaving during emergencies. I pull out my phone and show him the text proving there was no emergency, just a staged scenario. His expression shifts from skeptical to concerned as he reads my mother's messages about paying everyone involved. He calls over another officer, and they both review the evidence before starting an official report. The CPS home visit happens that evening right at 6. Dustin Yu arrives with a female colleague who introduces herself, but whose name I immediately forget. My mother is waiting in the living room wearing a nice sweater and makeup, looking concerned and maternal. She performs beautifully for them. She's warm, apologetic about the exercise going too far, promising she'll never do anything like it again. She talks about wanting what's best for me, and not realizing how traumatic the experience would be. When Dustin Yu asks to speak with me privately, we go to my room and I close the door. I show him everything on my phone. The texts, the video, the timeline, the evidence of payment. His face stays professionally neutral, but I see him taking detailed notes in a small notebook. When we finish, he thanks me and we go back downstairs. Before leaving, he tells my mother they'll be following up with additional visits and safety planning. Her smile doesn't quite reach her eyes. That night around 10, I check my email and find a message from someone named Jennifer Hayes, who identifies herself as a local education reporter. She says she heard about an incident at my school involving a controversial drama exercise. I don't respond immediately. Instead, I forward the email to Attorney Murray with a question mark in the subject line. She calls me within an hour and says media attention could help or hurt depending on how it's handled. We need to be strategic about what information gets released and when. She tells me not to respond yet, and that she'll think about the best approach. The next morning, I wake up early and check the school district's website out of habit. There's a new statement posted with yesterday's date. I read it 3 times, feeling sick. They're calling the incident a training simulation designed to help students develop emotional authenticity for performing arts applications. The statement emphasizes that all participants were volunteers and that the exercise was approved through appropriate channels. They make it sound legitimate and educational rather than abusive. I screenshot the entire statement and save it to my evidence folder, my hands clenched tight around my phone. The suspension notice arrives in the mail 2 days later, delivered by a postal worker who makes me sign for the certified letter. I rip open the thick envelope right there on the porch, hands shaking as I pull out the official forms. 3 pages of school district letterhead listing my supposed violations. Elopement from campus and physical altercation with safety personnel, with a hearing date circled in red 2 weeks from now. My mother's signature is required at the bottom of the parent acknowledgement form. I take photos of every page before bringing it inside, then scan the entire packet and email it to Attorney Murray with the subject line, urgent. She calls back within 20 minutes, her voice tight with controlled anger as she tells me she's filing an immediate appeal. She dictates her argument while I listen. About illegal detention and reasonable fear based on false information. About school employees providing that false information deliberately. I hear her keyboard clicking in the background as she types, and she promises the appeal will be submitted before end of business today. That night, I'm lying in bed scrolling through my phone when my chest suddenly tightens like someone's sitting on it. I can't get enough air no matter how hard I breathe, and my vision starts closing in from the edges like I'm looking through a tunnel. My hands go numb and tingly, and I'm absolutely convinced something terrible has actually happened, that the accident was real and I somehow got the timeline wrong. I stumble out of bed and down the hall to Raymond's room, gasping, and he jumps up from his desk where he was doing homework. He grabs my shoulders and makes me look at him, telling me he's right here, he's alive, nothing happened. I keep trying to breathe, but it feels like my lungs won't expand properly, and he sits me down on his floor and breathes slowly and deliberately, making me match his rhythm. It takes forever, maybe 20 minutes, before my chest loosens enough that I can breathe normally again. My whole body is shaking and covered in sweat, and Raymond gets me a glass of water that I spill half of trying to drink. When I can finally stand up again, I go back to my room and pull out the journal I started for CPS. I write down everything. The time it started, every symptom, how long it lasted, what triggered it, how Raymond helped. The act of documenting it makes it feel slightly more manageable, like I'm taking something horrible and turning it into evidence that might protect someone else someday. Around 11 that night, Raymond knocks on my door and asks if he can come in. He sits on the edge of my bed looking miserable, picking at a thread on my comforter, and finally admits that Mom promised him a role in a professional production if he helped make the scenario believable. He says she told him it would just be a little emotional, that I'd understand once I saw how good the footage was, that this was how real actors prepared for serious roles. His voice cracks when he asks if I can forgive him, and I tell him the truth, that I can't yet, but maybe someday if he's willing to tell anyone who asks exactly what happened. He nods and says he'll do whatever I need, that he watched the video after everything, and he didn't understand how bad it would be until he saw my face. We sit there in silence for a while before he leaves, and I add notes about this conversation to my journal too, documenting his admission about Mom's promises. The next afternoon, Marlon from AV Club meets me at the public library with a thumb drive and a stapled packet of papers. He explains in a low voice that he archived the video files with full metadata verification, and he slides the technical report across the table showing file creation dates, device information, and digital signatures proving nothing's been edited. Then he leans in closer and tells me he managed to pull the raw file from the school district's cloud storage before anyone thought to lock down access. And now I have proof that this was stored on official school servers with timestamps showing exactly when Ms. Brennan uploaded it. I thank him quietly and slip the thumb drive into my bag, feeling the weight of this evidence like something solid and real I can hold on to. Attorney Murray sends the preservation letters that Friday, and she forwards me copies so I can see exactly what she wrote. The letters go to the school district's legal department and to my mother at our home address, formally requiring them to preserve all documents, emails, videos, and communications related to the incident. The language is official and intimidating, warning that destroying evidence could result in additional legal consequences and court sanctions. I read through the letters 3 times, feeling a small but real sense of power, knowing they can't just delete everything and pretend this never happened, that there are legal consequences now if they try to cover their tracks. Dustin Yu from CPS calls me the following week to schedule a safety plan meeting, and I step outside into the backyard so my mother can't hear the conversation. He explains that my mother's control over my career decisions and her willingness to cause psychological harm are concerning enough that they need ongoing monitoring. He asks directly if I feel safe living at home, and I tell him truthfully that I'm not physically afraid, but I don't trust her judgment anymore, that I can't predict what she'll do next. He says the safety plan will include mandatory counseling for both of us and clear boundaries about consent for any future acting opportunities, and I'll have to sign off on anything before it happens. Principal Snap calls me into his office 2 days before the suspension hearing, and I walk in with my phone already recording in my pocket. He's sitting behind his desk looking tired, and he slides a document across to me, saying he can lift the suspension immediately if I'll just sign this mutual non-disclosure agreement. I pick it up and read through it slowly, seeing the terms that would release the school from all liability, plus a media release letting them use the video for educational training purposes, plus a statement that I participated voluntarily in the exercise. I look up at him and say I need to discuss this with my attorney, watching his face fall when he realizes I have legal representation. He tries to argue that this is the simplest solution for everyone, but I'm already standing up and walking out, the recording safely captured on my phone. Jennifer Hayes emails me again that evening with a subject line that says, URGENTFOLLOWUP. She writes that she received an anonymous tip showing the school's official statement contradicts the actual video evidence and timeline, and she's asking if I'm willing to go on record with my version of events. I forward the entire email to Attorney Murray without responding, and she calls within the hour to set up an emergency meeting to discuss whether media exposure will help or hurt my case at this point. We meet at her office the next morning, and she walks me through the risks and benefits for over an hour, talking about public perception and legal strategy, and the fact that once this story is public, I can't take it back. I agree to do the interview with her present, and we call Jennifer Hayes right there from Attorney Murray's conference room to set it up. The interview happens that afternoon in the same conference room, with Jennifer Hayes setting up a recording device and opening her notebook. Attorney Murray sits beside me as I share selected materials, the text from my mother with the timestamps visible, the detailed timeline I created, the medical documentation of my scraped knees, and a 30-second clip from the video showing me screaming while being held down. Jennifer asks careful questions about whether I knew this was an exercise, whether anyone told me beforehand, whether I consented to being filmed, and I answer each one while Attorney Murray monitors to make sure I don't say anything that could hurt the legal case. For the first time since this started, I feel heard by someone who isn't being paid to listen, someone who's asking questions because she genuinely wants to understand what happened. The article publishes 2 days later on the local news website with a headline that reads, Local high school's method acting exercise raises questions about student consent and psychological safety. I read it 3 times, seeing my story laid out in careful journalistic language, seeing quotes from education experts questioning whether this type of scenario is ever appropriate for minors. The comment section explodes within hours, some people defending the school and calling me oversensitive, others horrified that adults would deliberately traumatize a teenager for an audition tape. I read the first 50 comments, watching strangers debate whether my trauma was justified, whether I should just get over it, whether my mother should lose custody, whether the school should be sued. My hands start shaking again and I disable all notifications on my phone, unable to handle any more strangers weighing in on the worst experience of my life. Around 7 that evening, the doorbell rings. I look through the peephole and see Ms. Brennan standing on my porch holding a bouquet of yellow flowers and what looks like an envelope. Mom's car isn't in the driveway. She's at some audition across town. I open the door but keep the chain lock on. Miss Brennan's eyes are red and puffy like she's been crying for hours. She asks if we can talk privately and promises she won't take much of my time. I unlock the chain and let her in. But before I do anything else, I pull out my phone and start a voice recording, keeping it in my hoodie pocket where she can't see. She sits on our couch and sets the flowers on the coffee table, then hands me the envelope with shaking hands. Inside is 3 pages of handwritten apology on floral stationery, her cursive neat and careful. She starts crying again and tells me she never meant to hurt me. She thought she was helping my career, giving me a real experience to draw from. Her voice cracks when she says she realizes now how wrong that was. Then she leans forward and says, if I could just move forward from this whole thing, she'd be willing to write me the most amazing recommendation letter for Juilliard. She says she still has connections there and her word carries weight. I thank her for the apology but don't promise anything about moving forward or dropping anything. She leaves 20 minutes later looking disappointed. I save the recording immediately, labeling it with the date and time, adding it to my evidence folder. The next afternoon, I'm doing homework at the kitchen table when the doorbell rings again. This time it's Dustin Yu from CPS with a woman he introduces as his colleague, Miss Yu Park. He says they read the news article this morning and have some follow-up questions. Mom's home this time, sitting in her chair by the window pretending to read a magazine. Dustin asks if they can interview me separately, and Mom's face goes tight, but she nods. We go to my room and they sit on my bed while I take my desk chair. Dustin pulls out a notebook and asks me to tell them about other times Mom pushed me into uncomfortable situations for career stuff. I tell them about the swimsuit commercial audition she signed me up for without asking me first, how I was only 13, and didn't want to stand in front of strangers in a bikini, but she said it was professional, and I needed to get over my body issues. Ms. Park writes everything down. I tell them about the time Mom told a casting director I was 16 when I was only 14, so I could audition for an adult role that had a kissing scene. Dustin's pen moves faster across his notebook. They ask more questions for over an hour, about consent and whether Mom asks what I want, or just tells me what's happening. When they finally leave, Mom doesn't say anything to me for the rest of the night. 2 days later, the school district sends out an email announcement about an emergency special school board meeting scheduled for next week. The subject line says it's to review the recent incident and discuss potential policy changes around student welfare and experimental teaching methods. The meeting is open to the public. I forward it to Attorney Murray within minutes. She calls me an hour later and says she's already drafting paperwork to get me added to the agenda as a speaker. We schedule a meeting at her office for tomorrow to start preparing my testimony. When I show up the next day, she has a template statement printed out with blank spaces for me to fill in with specific details. We spend 3 hours going through what I want to say, what evidence I want to present, how to stay calm if people challenge me. Every time I practice reading the statement out loud, my hands shake so bad the papers rattle. Attorney Murray tells me that's normal, and to expect it during the actual meeting too. That evening, Raymond knocks on my bedroom door and asks if we can talk again. I let him in, and he sits on the floor with his back against my bed. He admits Mom has been pressuring him with the same tactics for years, threatening to pull her support if he doesn't book roles, comparing him to other young actors who are more successful, making him feel like he's failing the whole family when he doesn't land an audition. We stay up until almost midnight talking about how neither of us can remember the last time Mom asked what we actually wanted instead of telling us what we should want. He says he's tired of performing for her approval. I tell him I am too. We make a pact right there to start setting boundaries together and to back each other up when she pushes back against them. The week passes slowly, and then suddenly the meeting day arrives. Attorney Murray picks me up at 6:30 because the meeting starts at 7 and she wants us there early. The school board meeting room is packed when we walk in. Parents fill most of the seats, some holding homemade signs that say things like, "Support our teachers and innovative education works." Other signs say, "Protect student mental health and students are not props." Teachers line the back wall. I spot Ms. Rodriguez, the substitute drama teacher, standing near the door. Students cluster in the side aisles, some from my drama class, others I barely know. Reporters set up cameras in the corners. The atmosphere feels tense and charged, like everyone's waiting for something to explode. Attorney Murray guides me to seats in the front row. I try to keep my breathing steady, but my chest feels tight. The board members file in and take their seats behind the long table at the front. Principal Snap sits off to the side with the district's lawyer. Ms. Brennan is absent. The board president calls the meeting to order and explains the agenda. Public comment period first, then my testimony, then board discussion and potential action. 3 parents speak during public comment defending Ms. Brennan and talking about how drama education requires pushing boundaries. 2 parents speak about their concerns for student safety. Then the board president calls my name. I walk to the microphone stand with my printed copies of Mom's texts in one hand and the thumb drive in the other. Attorney Murray nods at me from her seat. My voice shakes when I start reading, but grows stronger as I go through the specific messages. I read the one about paying everyone at the school, the one about the Juilliard Scouts dying when they see the footage, the one about how every great actor has suffered. Then I ask the board's tech person to play the video file from my thumb drive. The screen on the wall lights up with 30 seconds of me screaming, while Officer Boots and Officer Goto hold me down on the asphalt. My voice on the video is raw and terrified, begging them to let me go to the hospital. The room goes completely silent. I see several board members lean back in their chairs looking genuinely shaken. One woman covers her mouth with her hand. When the clip ends, I return to my seat and the room stays quiet for almost a full minute. The board discusses for 2 hours, calling up Principal Snap to answer questions, reviewing the district's policies, listening to more public comment. Parents argue back and forth about whether this was educational or abusive. Finally, the board president calls for a vote. They vote 6-1 to place Principal Snap and Ms. Brennan on paid administrative leave pending a full investigation. They also announce an immediate policy review around student consent for all experiential learning activities. It's not everything I wanted since they're still getting paid, but watching Principal Snap's face as a security guard escorts him out of the meeting gives me a grim sense that consequences are finally starting to happen. People file out slowly after the meeting ends, some still arguing in small groups. Officer Boots and Officer Goto approach me near the door and ask if they can speak with me briefly. We step outside into the parking lot. They both apologize again, their voices quiet and serious. Officer Godo tells me he has a daughter my age and he's been losing sleep thinking about how he'd feel if someone did this to her. They explain they were told this was a legitimate emergency and that I was a danger to myself. Officer Boots says they should have questioned the orders more carefully. They both offer to testify about what orders they received and from who if it helps my case. I thank them, and Attorney Murray takes their contact information. The following week, Dustin Yu calls and asks me to come to the CPS office with my mother to finalize the safety plan. We sit in a conference room with gray walls and harsh fluorescent lights. Dustin slides papers across the table explaining each requirement. Mom has to attend parenting classes focused on appropriate boundaries with performing arts children. I get individual therapy covered by the state. Any future auditions or acting opportunities require my written consent with a 48-hour consideration period before I have to decide. Mom signs each page with barely hidden anger, her pen pressing so hard it nearly tears through the paper. Dustin makes it clear that refusing would mean escalating to foster care placement. Mom's jaw clenches, but she complies. 3 days later, I get an email from the school district saying my suspension is officially lifted and expunged from my record. The preliminary findings show I was acting under false information provided by school employees. I return to campus the following Monday, and the atmosphere feels strange and off balance. Some students avoid eye contact when I walk past them in the hallways. Others whisper to their friends and go quiet when I get close. A few people I barely know give me small supportive nods or thumbs up. At lunch, Tyler from drama class approaches my table and asks if he can sit down. He apologizes for freezing during the incident, saying he wishes he'd done something to help instead of just standing there in shock. I tell him it's okay, that I don't blame him for not knowing what to do. He sits with me for the rest of lunch, and we don't talk about the incident again. Just normal stuff about the calc test next period, and the substitute teacher's weird habit of always wearing purple. Over the next week, the social landscape at the school shifted into clear groups. Tyler kept sitting with me at lunch, making jokes about the calc homework and acting like everything was normal, which I appreciated more than he probably knew. A couple other drama kids joined us, people who'd been quiet during the whole mess, but now seemed willing to be seen with me. But there was another group, the ones who'd been Ms. Brennan's favorites, who shot me looks in the hallways and whispered when I walked past. I caught pieces of their conversations in the bathroom between classes, heard someone say I was ruining Ms. Brennan's whole career over what was just a drama exercise. I walked out before I could say something I'd regret. The weird thing was feeling so alone even when I knew I was right. Everyone else could pretend it was no big deal, but I was the one who'd lived through it, who still woke up some nights convinced something terrible had happened. That gap between what they thought and what I knew felt like standing on opposite sides of a canyon with no bridge across. At home, my mother switched tactics completely. She stopped asking about my day when I got home from the school, stopped making the foods I liked for dinner, started leaving notes on the kitchen counter instead of talking to me directly. Things like dentist appointment Tuesday, or need you to take out trash. Her whole communication style went cold and distant, like I was a roommate she barely knew instead of her daughter. When I walked into a room, she'd sigh loudly, this pointed exhale that made it clear my presence was an inconvenience. The fridge gradually filled with foods she knew I didn't eat, stuff with ingredients I'd told her 100 times I didn't like. I called Attorney Murray about it, and she told me to write everything down, every single instance of the silent treatment and emotional withdrawal. She explained this was a common thing abusers did when they lost control, trying to punish you into compliance through coldness instead of confrontation. So I started keeping detailed notes in a journal, documenting the hostile silence, the forgotten groceries, the way she'd leave a room when I entered it. I wrote down dates and times and specific examples, building another evidence file of how she was handling losing power over me. Attorney Murray helped me set up new boundaries around my technology and accounts. I changed every password on every account I had, making them all different and complex. Removed my mother's access to my phone's location services so she couldn't track where I was anymore. Opened a separate bank account at a different bank where she had no access or even knowledge it existed. Set up 2-factor authentication on everything, my email and social media and cloud storage. Each small step felt like taking back a piece of myself that she'd claimed without ever asking permission. It was weird how much those little changes mattered, how much lighter I felt knowing she couldn't monitor my every move anymore. When she noticed the changes, she confronted me in the kitchen one evening, demanding to know why I was shutting her out. I kept my voice steady and told her privacy wasn't the same thing as secrecy, that I had a right to boundaries even if she didn't like them. She didn't have a good response to that, just stared at me for a long moment before walking away. The substitute drama teacher started the following week. Mrs. Rodriguez introduced herself to the class on Monday morning, a woman in her 40s with short gray hair and a calm, steady presence. She told us right away that all activities would be clearly explained in advance, that we'd have opt-out options for anything emotionally heavy, and that consent was going to be a core value in her classroom. The room did feel safer after that, but there was this bittersweet sadness underneath it, knowing I couldn't trust this space the way I used to. I caught myself checking the exits during class, keeping my phone in my pocket instead of in my bag, unable to fully relax even though Ms. Brennan was gone. The damage was already done, the trust already broken, and having a better teacher now didn't erase what had happened here. Jennifer Hayes published her follow-up article about a week later. This one focused on the school district's policy review process, interviewing education psychologists and child welfare experts about appropriate boundaries in teaching. The article was more balanced than the first one, actually acknowledging that method acting had value while questioning whether teenagers could truly consent to traumatic scenarios designed by adults. I read it twice, taking my time with it, and felt less angry this time. More able to see the bigger picture beyond just my own experience. To understand this was about something larger than what happened to me specifically. 2 weeks after that, a thick envelope arrived from the school district's attorney. Inside was a settlement proposal laying out specific terms. A formal written apology from the district. Mandatory training for all staff on student consent and psychological safety. Full coverage of my therapy costs for as long as I needed it. A financial settlement for my medical expenses and emotional distress. I read through all the pages carefully, then called Attorney Murray. She came over that evening and reviewed everything with me at the kitchen table. The thing that surprised her most was what wasn't in there. No requirement for an NDA or media silence. No clause saying I had to stop talking about what happened. She said it was surprisingly reasonable for a school district, that they were actually acknowledging wrongdoing instead of just trying to make the problem go away quietly. I told Attorney Murray I'd only accept if there was absolutely no requirement that I stay quiet or pretend any of this was acceptable. She called the district's attorney the next day and negotiated back and forth. They agreed to my terms. I could keep speaking publicly about my experience. The video remained my property. They acknowledged in writing that the exercise violated their own policies around student welfare. When I signed the papers, I felt like I'd held onto my principles while still getting real accountability, which seemed like the best outcome I could hope for. A few days later, Ms. Brennan's personal apology letter showed up in the mail. 3 pages of handwritten explanation about how she got swept up in my mother's vision, how she didn't stop to question whether the exercise was appropriate for a minor, how she should have protected me as her student. She took partial responsibility for what happened, though I noticed she was careful not to say anything that might get her in legal trouble. I read it several times over the next few days. My anger started softening into something more complicated, this mix of frustration and sadness, and maybe a tiny bit of understanding. She was wrong, completely wrong, but at least she was trying to figure out why, which was more than my mother had done. That evening, my phone buzzed with a text from Raymond. Just one line that said, "I'm sorry I didn't protect you. I should have been a better brother. I'm working on it." I sat on my bed and cried reading it, then wrote back that I was working on forgiveness and it was going to take time, but I was glad he was getting help. He told me he'd started seeing a counselor who worked with kids of narcissistic parents. We started meeting for coffee once a week after that, sitting in the corner booth at the place near school and talking about Mom, about how to set boundaries with her, about supporting each other through the ongoing tension at home. It felt like maybe we could rebuild something between us, slowly. 3 months after everything started, CPS scheduled their final review. Dustin Yu called me in for a meeting at their office downtown. He reported that my mother had attended all the required parenting classes, and I'd been going to therapy consistently like I was supposed to. He said the home environment was still emotionally strained, which felt like an understatement, but it no longer met the threshold for keeping the case open. They'd close it but flag it for quick reopening if new concerns came up. I felt relieved and anxious at the same time, glad to have less oversight, but worried about losing the external pressure that had been keeping my mother's behavior somewhat in check. The week after CPS closed my case, I started meeting with Dr. Grimes in the small counseling office near the library. She had these comfortable chairs that didn't squeak and a white noise machine outside the door, so nobody could hear what we talked about. The first session I mostly cried and she handed me tissues without saying much, just let me get it all out. The second session we started mapping out what she called my triggers, writing them on sticky notes and putting them on the wall. Feeling trapped. Being lied to. People making decisions about my life without asking me. Seeing my mother's number pop up on my phone. By the 4th session, the wall was covered in yellow squares, and Dr. Grimes said something that made my whole body go still. She told me my mother's behavior fit a pattern called narcissistic parenting, where the parent sees the child as an extension of themselves instead of a separate person. She said setting boundaries wasn't selfish or ungrateful, it was actually necessary for my mental health. I walked out of that session feeling lighter, like someone had finally given me permission to protect myself. Over the next few weeks, we worked on coping strategies for when I felt my autonomy being threatened. Deep breathing exercises, grounding techniques where I'd touch something cold or count objects in the room, a script I could use when my mother started pushing. The sessions were hard, really hard, but each week I left feeling a little more solid in myself, a little less like I was made of glass that could shatter if someone pushed too hard. For one of Dr. Grimes's assignments, she asked me to record a video narrative about consent and boundaries, but not for auditions or college applications, just for myself. I set up my phone on my desk one evening when the house was empty and hit record. At first I just stared at the camera, not sure what to say. Then I started talking about what it felt like to have my emotions manipulated for someone else's goals, how it felt like being a puppet with someone else pulling the strings, how I'd spent so long trying to be what my mother wanted that I'd forgotten to figure out what I actually wanted. I talked about the difference between supporting someone's dreams and forcing them into a path they never chose. The words came out shaky at first, but then stronger, more certain. When I finished, I had this 15-minute video that felt more real than any audition tape I'd ever recorded. I saved it to a private folder and didn't watch it for 3 days. When I finally did, sitting cross-legged on my bed with headphones on, I barely recognized the person on screen. She looked confident, articulate, sure of herself. I realized I was starting to find my own voice separate from what my mother wanted me to be, and it sounded nothing like I'd expected. That weekend, I started researching performing arts programs on my laptop. But this time, I wasn't looking at rankings or prestige. I searched for schools with strong mental health support and student advocacy policies. I found a program in Oregon that had a full-time counselor just for theater students and clear policies about consent in experimental coursework. Another school in Massachusetts advertised their student wellness center right on the drama department homepage. I bookmarked programs at smaller schools I'd never heard of before, places with robust counseling services and statements about protecting student autonomy. The idea of choosing based on what I actually needed instead of what sounded impressive to other people felt revolutionary and scary in equal measure. My mother had always pushed Juilliard, Carnegie Mellon, schools with famous names that she could brag about to her friends. But sitting there with my laptop open, reading about a tiny program in Vermont that emphasized student well-being over competition, I felt something shift inside me. Maybe I didn't have to choose the path that looked best from the outside. Maybe I could choose the one that would actually keep me safe. 3 weeks later, my mother and I ended up at the kitchen table one evening after Raymond went to his friend's house. She'd made tea, which she only did when she wanted to have a serious conversation. We sat across from each other, and for a long time, neither of us said anything. Then she started talking, haltingly, about being terrified of being a failed parent. She said she pushed me so hard because she didn't want me to have the regrets she had about her own abandoned acting dreams. Her voice cracked when she talked about being 23 and giving up her theater company to get married and have kids. It wasn't a full apology, and she still didn't seem to fully grasp how damaging her actions had been, but it was the first time she'd acknowledged that her fear drove her choices instead of my actual needs. I told her clearly, keeping my voice steady the way Dr. Grimes and I had practiced, that I needed her to see me as a separate person with my own goals, not an extension of her unfulfilled ambitions. She nodded, but I could see the struggle in her eyes, like she was trying to understand something in a foreign language. The conversation didn't fix everything, but it felt different from all the previous fights, less like a battle, and more like two people trying to find their way through fog. The school board released its final report at the end of the term. I read it on my phone during lunch, sitting alone at a corner table. Principal Snap had resigned and accepted a non-school position with the district office, where he'd shuffle papers and never interact with students again. Ms. Brennan got reassigned to a middle school with mandatory supervision and retraining on student welfare policies. New district-wide policies now required parental consent and psychological screening before any experiential learning activities involving emotional distress. It wasn't a clean win. Both of them kept their jobs and pensions. Nobody got fired or lost their teaching license. But the policy changes might protect future students, and sitting there reading the official language about informed consent and student safety protocols, I decided that mattered more than perfect punishment. I forwarded the report to Attorney Murray with a short message thanking her for everything. She wrote back within minutes saying I should be proud of what I'd accomplished, that changing institutional policy was harder than most people realized. I saved her message and read it 3 more times that afternoon. 3 months after everything started, I walked past the auditorium on my way to meet Raymond and Tyler at the coffee shop off campus. The space where I'd had my breakdown looked ordinary now, just an empty stage with work lights on and some props from the current production scattered around. I paused for a second, looking through the small window in the door, and felt nothing. No panic, no anger, just a distant memory of something that happened to a different version of me. I pulled out my phone and texted both Raymond and Tyler that I was on my way, adding a joke about needing extra caffeine for the calc test tomorrow. Tyler sent back 3 coffee emojis, and Raymond replied with, "Same, I didn't study at all." I smiled and kept walking, my backpack heavy with textbooks and my college research folder tucked in the front pocket. I was still healing, still figuring out who I was separate from my mother's expectations, but I was moving forward on my own terms now. The weight of what happened would probably always be there, sitting somewhere in my chest, but it didn't define every step anymore. It just informed them, reminded me to keep choosing myself even when it was hard, even when my mother looked disappointed, even when the path I picked didn't look impressive to anyone else. I pushed open the door to the parking lot and headed toward the coffee shop, ready to spend an hour with my brother and my friend, just being a regular high school student with a calculus test to worry about.